if your brand doesn't make at least 30% of its revenue every single month from email, then chances are you're emailing too much or you're not emailing enough. And so this begs the question, exactly how many emails should you be sending each week? In this video, we're going to cover exactly how many emails you should be sending, depending on your list size, depending on your product type, as well as some key performance thresholds to look out for. So when you start to get diminishing returns, for example. We'll also cover a few overlooked tactics that brands don't really use that often and that you can use to protect your deliverability as well as drive more revenue per email sent. So before we jump into the details of exactly how many emails and when to send them, etc., it's important to understand the psychology behind email today, because it's more than just a communication channel. It's not just a way for you to deliver a message to your customers. There's a lot more to it than that. And your emails that you send unconsciously train your customers. And let me explain what I mean by that. So if you start to send consistently with value, then people are going to start looking forward to hearing from your emails. On the other hand, if you don't send enough or you send too often, then people start to tune you out, or worse, they start to unsubscribe and mark your emails as spam. Now, there's a classic behavioral concept which is called habituation. And what that means is that if something becomes too frequent or meaningless, then it becomes part of the background and people tune it out. But if it's predictable and it's useful, then instead it becomes part of a ritual. So that's your goal, essentially. You want to make your email reading experience, your brand experience for your emails, for your customers, to become a ritual. I'll give you an example from one of our clients that we work with. They're a B2B wholesaler. They've got about 60,000 SKUs across their business. Now, every single Tuesday, they do a discount. They call it, I'm not going to say what it is, but they do a specific kind of discount every single Tuesday at 8 a.m. So they're selling to businesses, and every single morning, 8 a.m., they get a discount in their inbox for the customers. I mean, you don't even need to send an email and people are thinking about your brand, because they wake up on a Tuesday morning and they get into work and they know, oh, I'll have got an email at exactly 8 o'clock from this company. And so that's a way that you can make, again, your emails a ritual and make it part of a routine. So that should be your goal there. So a simple framework then that we use across Shawfire as to how many emails a week should you send. This is a thumb rule, and it really does depend on your individual business, but between 0 and 5K, or maybe 3-ish K, I'd send an email a week. I wouldn't really do too much more than that. At that point, your list is quite small. You're not really going to see a massive ROI on the time that you spend to create email or paying an agency to actually run those emails for you. So about an email a week until you're maybe 3,000 to 5,000 subscribers. Once you're pushing above 5K and you're going towards 10K, that's when I'd start doing 2 per week. Again, you can start to incorporate a little bit more segmentation there, where you've got emails just for customers or emails for non-subscribers, or even maybe some win-back customers. But until about 5K, you're kind of going quite broad with it. You're contacting engaged subscribers, customers, and then maybe a whole list, and that's pretty much it. But once you start getting to that 5 to 10K mark, that's when you're picking up a lot of sort of dead weight people who aren't really buying from you, and that's where you can start to try and convert non-customers into customers. And you'll also start getting a lot of people mounting up who are lapsed customers that you want to try and win back over, as well as some unengaged as well. So between 5 and 10K is really when it starts to make more sense to do more segmentation. Then when you're beyond 10K and up to about 25, maybe 2025, I do about 3 emails per week on that. Again, segmented based on the same fundamentals we just discussed: customers, non-customers, lapsed customers, engaged, unengaged. Those are your main segments that you want to target. From that point, once you're beyond the 25K mark, that's when you can get really granular with your segments. So you want to test and adjust this. And again, try and keep your segments above at least 500 to 1,000 as a bare minimum that you want to contact. Anything below that, unless they're like your VIP customers where they're spending a fortune with you, then I don't see those segments really paying off. That being said, I've worked with lists of 10,000 and we've sent a VIP segment of just like 200 people a Black Friday offer, and they ended up making up like 70% of the revenue for the whole Black Friday. It was crazy. And it really does go to show is it the Pareto principle, I think, the 80-20 rule thing, where 80% of your business is made up by the 20%. And that was a perfect example of it. In fact, it was even less than 20%. So yeah, that's the idea. You want to slowly ramp it up as your email list grows. Now, there's some nuances here. As I mentioned, it depends on the type of brand that you are. So I'm going to share some of the data of all the brands that we work with. I'm going to share some of the experiences that we've seen from working with so many different brands in different verticals. So back in 2023, we found that sending more emails often annoyed subscribers, and so it made your unsubscribe rates go up. Something changed in 2024 and now in 2025, where sending more emails seemed to work for whatever reason. So we work with a company called Inform NYC. They're a fashion brand based in New York City, and they started to increase the amount of emails that they were sending. I think we were doing like 25 per month at one point, and their list isn't that big. They were like 7K subscribers, something like that. But these were highly segmented campaigns. Now, we increased it up from, I think, about 16 up to 25 monthly, and their email revenue kept going up and up and up. So every month that we increased it, the email revenue also tracked that. Now, we started to get diminishing returns from that point, and so we dialed it back down and then found like a happy medium, maybe around 22-ish, something like that. So the story there, or the moral of the story, is that you want to try and increase the amount of emails that you're sending until you get those diminishing returns. If you're seeing the cost that it takes for you to create an email, time cost, monetary cost, if the cost of creating that email is minuscule compared to the revenue that it drives, then it makes sense to send more emails. But then once that starts to outweigh the revenue, that's when you want to cut it back a bit. At the same time, you want to look at the deliverability stats. So if you increase the amount of emails that you send, what does that do to your open rates, your click rates, your unsubscribes? Chances are those things are going to get worse in performance. So that's something that you want to check. And then similarly, another one of our clients, The Good Chocolate, there's a case study on our website. We increased the emails that we were sending from, I think it was like 2 per week to 3 or 4 sometimes. And the revenue shot up. So that was back last year in summer 2024, I believe. And that was an example where I personally didn't think that emailing more would generate more revenue, but we did. And we did it with those guys first, and then we started doing it with other clients, and then out of nowhere, all of the revenues went up. So yeah, I think that these days, and then again, this could change and it might be different for your niche, but these days sending more emails seems to translate into more revenue. But again, that could change. People could get sick of you or whatever. The main driver of this is just the fact that everybody is sending more emails. And so people kind of expect it. And in order to get people's attention, you need to be there more frequently. I think that's what it is. Now, we tried doing this as well for a jewelry company last year. We tried to increase the amount of emails that we sent, and we did see diminishing returns there. So that's an example of how you've got jewelry, and then you've got consumable chocolate. You've got somewhat fast fashion as well, where those types of products are more consumable and people buy them more frequently than jewelry brands, for example. If somebody buys a piece of jewelry, I've got a cross necklace that I've had that now for like 2 years or something, and I've not bought a single item since. So if I was being peppered with emails every single week about buying another necklace or whatever it might be, then I'm not going to want to buy from that company. I'm going to unsubscribe. So it really does depend on who your brand is and the typical buying cycle of your brand. Chocolate's consumable. You can go through that in a month. Fashion might be maybe a month or two longer than that. Jewelry, maybe longer. So judge that based on how quick your buying cycle is concluded. So how can you find your ideal frequency then? Well, the first thing you want to do is start with the table that I just mentioned. So depending on what your list size is, try and follow that to begin with, and then simply increase it or decrease it from there. I'd start by increasing it because it seems like more emails means more revenue. But again, take that with a pinch of salt and remember that it's industry dependent. So if you want a specific answer, then you should speak to me directly instead, and then I can give you my expertise and my opinion based on your business. But generally speaking, start with that table and then start to increase it. There's 3 metrics that you want to check for immediately. Revenue per email, of course, most important, unsubscribe rate, and your spam rate. Those 3 things and how they move will determine how successful this strategy is. If your revenue goes up, great, but if your unsubscribe and spam goes up as well, you want to consider maybe dialing it down at the same time. So if the people who are unsubscribing are not customers, then fine. It's not really a big loss. If they are customers, then that's something you want to be wary of because you don't want to lose customers long-term for short-term revenue gains. So something to bear in mind. Generally speaking, if your unsubscribe rates are below 0.5, your spam rates are below 0.1 or 0.01 or whatever, check your Klaviyo benchmarks. That will give you a more accurate depiction depending on your niche. If you've got historically low unsubscribe and spam rates for your industry, then you should send more emails until those things start to creep up. So that's probably the best way that you can decide here and that you can test to see, Are we sending enough? Are we really extracting as much as we can from our list? A pro tip for this, make sure that you're always using email exclusion segments. So don't blast your recent buyers. For example, if somebody's purchased within the last week or two, or however long is logical for your brand, don't hit them again with another buying email. Give them some value instead, or nurture them, or educate them on the product they've bought. Don't try and get more money out of those people, because it just becomes like exploitative, and I don't appreciate that personally as a buyer when a brand tries to do that, and I'm sure that the majority of them don't either. But again, test it, see. The people who are unengaged on your list, you don't want to contact them too often, because you're just going to kill your deliverability there. I've got a full guide on exclusion segments, which I'll put in the description below, so check that out. You might have to sign up to my email list, and then you can get that, and then it will tell you what exclusion segments to use, when to use them, how to build them, and then you'll protect your deliverability, and you'll also maximize your email performance. So wrapping up then, what should you do? What shouldn't you do? Here's some things that we see too often that you should not be doing. So the first is sending based on your gut and not on metrics. Start with identifying your unsubscribe rate, your spam rate, your revenue per send, and use that as your North Star. If those things start to decrease or increase, if they start to get worse, basically, you need to change something. So if you start sending a lot of emails and those metrics get worse, then cut back and send fewer, and then the reverse thing should happen. Second thing, don't ignore your product life cycle. So again, this advice that I'm giving to you, you have to take everything with a pinch of salt. There's no one rule for every single brand. It's different depending on what you're selling. So high frequency works for snacks. It doesn't work for sofas, for example. Third thing, make sure you use the exclusions so that you don't contact people who don't want to be contacted, or it's not relevant to them. And then of course, make sure you're using your exclusion segments so that you protect your deliverability as you start to increase the amount of emails that you send. Your email list is one of your most valuable assets as a brand. This should be something that drives predictable and scalable revenue every single month. But the frequency in which you contact your list really does matter. And I know so many brands who have either done too much, or just as bad, they've done too little. And the effects really are not great for either of those camps. You want to make sure you're hitting it perfectly, but that doesn't just come from closing your eyes and blind firing at people. You want to test this. You want to look at your metrics and then say, okay, let's see what happens when we send more emails. What is the impact on the revenue? How many people unsubscribe? What's our ROI? This really is something you should test. And if you're in the camp of thinking that you shouldn't be emailing too much and you don't want to annoy people, then I would just throw that mindset in the bin completely, because it will not serve you whatsoever. You have to contact the people who are on your list. You have to give them value, give them information, give them offers, because they've signed up to hear from you, right? And if they get sick of hearing from you, well, then they can leave. That's the way that things work. Otherwise, you're just paying for a list of people who might hear from you once or twice per year, and no wonder why you're not generating much revenue then. And it's probably better to send too much than too little, to be honest. But again, take everything I say with a pinch of salt. So ultimately, if you're looking for somebody who can help you to figure all of this out, who can test this for you, then you should work with us, and we'll come in and we'll start sending these emails, take it off your plate, and then say, okay, this is the optimal amount of emails that you should be sending each month. If that sounds interesting, book a call below. Besides that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.